Most people think they're safe once they lock the front door. I used to think that too. Until the night I realized the lock didn't matter, because someone had already been inside my house for hours before I even got home. I want to start by saying I'm not someone who scares easily. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, worked night shifts at a warehouse for 6 years, lived alone for most of my adult life. I was used to empty houses and quiet nights. I never thought twice about coming home late, throwing my keys on the counter, and crashing without checking anything. That changed on a Wednesday in January. I'd gotten off work around 11:30 that night. It was the kind of cold that makes your face hurt the second you step outside. I remember pulling into my driveway and seeing that my porch light was off. I'd left it on when I left that morning, I always did. I figured the bulb had finally burned out. I made a mental note to replace it and went inside. The house felt normal. Nothing looked out of place. I hung up my jacket, kicked off my boots, went to the kitchen to grab some water. The only light I had on was the one above the stove. That was my usual routine. I didn't like harsh lights late at night. I drank my water, rinsed the glass, and started walking toward the hallway. That's when I noticed the bathroom door was closed. I never close that door. Not when I'm alone. I've lived in that house for 4 years, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, I do not close the bathroom door when I'm the only one there. It's just a habit I've never had. I stopped walking. I stood in the middle of my hallway and I stared at that door. And I told myself I was being stupid. I told myself I must have closed it that morning without thinking. I told myself a lot of things in those few seconds because the alternative, the thing my gut was already telling me, was too uncomfortable to accept. I pushed the door open. Empty. Just my bathroom. Towels on the rack, soap by the sink. Nothing wrong. I exhaled. Felt embarrassed at myself. Went to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and started taking off my socks. That's when I heard it. Not footsteps. Not a creak. It was a sound I still have trouble describing, like something shifting. Like the weight distribution in a room changing. It came from my closet. My closet door has always had a slight gap at the bottom, maybe half an inch, enough to notice if you're looking. And right then I was looking, and I could see that the darkness inside that closet was different than it should have been. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My brain was doing everything it could to rationalize what I was seeing. A box shifted, the cat I don't own, anything, and then the closet door moved. Not open, just shifted. Like something inside adjusted its weight against it. I have never in my life felt fear like that. Pure, physical fear. The kind that bypasses thought entirely and goes straight to your body. My legs were already moving before I made the decision to run. I made it to the front door, got it open, ran across my yard in my socks, and didn't stop until I was at my neighbor's porch, pounding on their door. My neighbor, Dave, opened it in about 30 seconds. I told him someone was in my house. He didn't ask questions. He called 911 and pulled me inside. The police arrived in under 5 minutes. 2 cruisers, 4 officers. I watched from Dave's window as they went in through the front door with flashlights cutting through every room. It took them less than 3 minutes to find him. He was in my closet, had been in there for, and this is what the detective told me later, somewhere between 3 and 5 hours. He'd come in through my back window, the one in the laundry room that I'd been meaning to get a better latch for. He'd been waiting. They arrested him in my bedroom. He didn't fight, didn't run. They walked him out in handcuffs, and I watched from across the street, and I couldn't stop shaking even though I wasn't cold anymore. His name wasn't released to me right away, but I later found out he was 31 years old, lived about 2 miles from my house, and had a history of breaking into homes in the area. What investigators couldn't immediately answer, and what I kept asking over and over, was why? Why come in and wait? Why not take anything and leave? They found a few of my kitchen knives on the floor of my closet with him. That's the part that stays with me. That's the detail I can't file away or make sense of. He wasn't there to rob me. He came in through that window with a plan, and he waited for hours in the dark for me to come home. I didn't go back to that house. I stayed at Dave's for 2 nights, then stayed with my sister for 2 weeks while I arranged to break my lease. I've never set foot in that house again. I don't plan to. What I think about now, what I can't stop thinking about, is all the nights before that one. How many times I walked in, didn't check anything, just went to bed. How many times did I assume the house was empty because it looked empty? Because nothing felt wrong. We build these routines around the idea that our home is the one place we don't have to be on guard. We lock the door and we exhale. And I understand that. I lived that way for years, but locks only keep people out. They don't tell you who got in before you turned the key. I replaced my windows. I have a security system now. I sleep with my bedroom door locked and a phone on the nightstand. And every single night before I get into bed, I check the closet. Every single night. Most people check if their doors are locked before they go to sleep. I did too, every single night. And it still wasn't enough. I've lived alone since I was 24. I moved into a small rental house on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom place with a cracked driveway and a backyard that backed up to a line of old oak trees. It felt safe. Quiet neighborhood, good neighbors, low crime. I never had a reason to be nervous. That changed in January of last year. It started small. The kind of thing you brush off the first time. I came home from work one evening and noticed the side gate was unlatched. I always latched it, always. But I told myself the wind got to it. I told myself I must have forgotten. I latched it again and went inside. 3 days later, I found the welcome mat on my front porch flipped upside down. Again, nothing that screams danger, but something about it made me feel off. That little itch at the back of your neck you can't explain. I mentioned it to my coworker Tom. He laughed and said I was paranoid. Maybe I was, but then something happened that I couldn't explain away. I had a basement. Nothing finished down there, just the water heater, some old boxes, a workbench my landlord left behind. I almost never went down there. One Saturday morning I went to grab a box of winter clothes and I stopped at the top of the stairs. The light was already on. I never left that light on. I hadn't been down there in weeks. I stood at the top of those stairs for probably 30 seconds, just listening. Nothing. No sound. I told myself I must have left it on the last time I was down there. But I walked through every other room before I went down. I needed to be sure. The basement was empty. Everything looked normal. I grabbed my box and went back upstairs, but I locked the basement door behind me, something I had never done before. 2 weeks went by, nothing happened. I started to relax again. Then came a Monday night in early February. I had worked a late shift, got home around 11:30, made something to eat and went to bed around midnight. I remember falling asleep fast. I was exhausted. I woke up at 2:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone. I wasn't sure what woke me up. No sound, no alarm. I just opened my eyes. And then I heard it, the refrigerator door closing. That soft, heavy thud it makes when it seals shut, clear as anything. I sat up in bed and didn't move. My brain immediately started making excuses. The house settling. The refrigerator motor kicking on. But I knew what I heard. I had lived in that house for over a year. I knew every sound it made. I reached over to my nightstand and grabbed the only thing I had, a heavy flashlight I kept there for power outages. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened for another 2 full minutes. Nothing. I told myself to calm down. I told myself I was going to walk out there, check the kitchen, and come back to bed. I stood up, moved to my bedroom door, and cracked it open slowly. The hallway was dark, kitchen at the end of it around the corner. I stood there listening, still nothing. I started moving down the hall, and then I heard breathing. Not mine, it was coming from the kitchen. Slow, low, like someone trying not to make noise. The kind of breath a person takes when they're trying to control themselves, when they're trying to stay calm. I froze. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body just locked up. My mind went completely white for a second. and then adrenaline hit me all at once. I did not go into that kitchen. I turned around, walked fast back to my room, shut the door, pushed my dresser against it with everything I had, and called 911. I whispered my address. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, stay quiet, stay in the room. I sat on the floor with my back against the dresser, holding that flashlight with both hands. For about 4 minutes I heard nothing. Then I heard footsteps, slow, careful footsteps moving through the hallway. They stopped right outside my bedroom door. I stopped breathing completely. The handle moved, just once, testing it, and then nothing. The police arrived 7 minutes after my call. They entered the house and found the back door and the kitchen wide open. The lock had been tampered with, not broken, not kicked in. Someone had worked it open carefully, cleanly. Someone who had done it before, or at least came prepared. They found food on my kitchen counter. Bread, lunch meat, a bottle of water, all pulled out of my fridge and left sitting there. Like someone had gotten comfortable. Like they had been there long enough to make themselves a meal. They searched the house and the yard. Whoever it was had left before they arrived. No one was found. But here's the part that still gets me. When the officers checked the basement, they found a folded blanket behind the water heater. An old gray blanket that was not mine. And next to it, a phone charger, still plugged into the wall. Someone had been using my basement. Not for one night. By the look of it, for weeks. I never found out who it was. The police had no leads. No one in the neighborhood had seen anything unusual. Whoever this person was, they were careful, patient. They had been living in my home, below my feet, while I slept, while I ate, while I went about my life completely unaware. I was out of that house within 4 days. I stayed with my brother while I found a new place. I still sleep with a flashlight on the nightstand. I still check every room before I lock up for the night. I check under beds. I check closets. I check basements. Because I know now that a locked door only stops someone who was never already inside. I'd been in my new place for about 3 weeks. A small rental house on the edge of an old neighborhood, quiet street, the kind of place where people mind their business. I got it cheap because the previous tenant had left in a hurry. The landlord told me the guy had a family emergency and had to relocate fast. I didn't think much of it at the time. People move. Life happens. The first thing I noticed was the food. I'm not a big grocery shopper. I keep things simple: eggs, bread, peanut butter, some fruit. So when I opened my fridge one Tuesday morning and saw a container of leftover rice I didn't remember making, I genuinely paused. I stood there staring at it. I thought maybe I'd made it half asleep or something. I threw it out and moved on. Then it happened again. Thursday night, I came home from a double shift and there was a glass of water sitting on my kitchen counter. Not mine. I hadn't used that glass. It was dry on the outside, like it had been sitting there a while, but there was still water in it. I started questioning myself. Was I sleepwalking? Was I more exhausted than I realized? I'd never had memory issues before, but I started keeping a mental note of everything I used, everything I touched. 2 days later, I noticed the thermostat had been changed. I keep it at 68. It was set to 74. My gas bill was going to hate me. I told my friend about it. He laughed it out. But I downloaded a free security app on my phone and propped my laptop up on the kitchen counter, angled toward the living room. Not a real camera setup, just something to make myself feel better. I almost didn't check the footage. It was a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, fully expecting to see nothing. I scrubbed through the overnight recording at 4x speed. The living room stayed dark and still for hours. I was about to close it out. Then I saw movement. Not near the front door, not near any window. It came from the hallway, the one that leads to the 2 back bedrooms. A figure stepped into the edge of the frame, moved toward the kitchen and disappeared out of view. Calm, quiet, no rushing, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. My coffee went cold. I sat there for a long time before I could even process what I was looking at. I watched it again, and again. Male figure, average build, barefoot. He went to the kitchen, was off-screen for maybe 4 minutes, then walked back down the hallway like he was heading back to bed. He didn't come in through any door that night. He was already inside. I called the police. They came, checked the house, found nothing. Nobody hiding in any closet under any bed. No sign of forced entry anywhere. They filed a report and told me to change my locks, which I thought was almost funny given that he clearly wasn't coming in through the locks. One of the officers, older guy, didn't say much, walked the house a second time on his own. He came back and asked me when I'd last looked at the door in the back bedroom, the one I'd been using as storage. I told him I hadn't really opened it much. It had a broken handle and I just avoided it. He showed me what was behind it. The handle wasn't broken. The mechanism had been deliberately disabled from the inside. When you pushed on the door from the room side, a small piece of metal, looked like part of a cabinet hinge, dropped into the frame and locked it shut from within. From the outside, it just felt stuck. I had assumed the door was a problem and never investigated further. Behind that door was a 6x8 space, barely bigger than a large closet, with a window that had been painted over on the inside. There was a sleeping bag on the floor, a small battery-powered lantern, a water bottle, a phone charger with no phone attached, and a hook on the wall where someone had hung a jacket. Someone had been living in that room, while I was sleeping 15 feet away. The landlord, when the police contacted him, was stunned or acted like it. The previous tenant, the one who'd supposedly relocated for a family emergency, had never returned his key. The landlord had changed the front lock, but hadn't thought about the back window, which I later found had a broken latch that let it open from outside with just a little pressure on the frame. The theory the police worked with was that the previous tenant had never actually left. He just moved himself into that back room and stayed. He had a setup. He had a routine. He was eating, using the thermostat, living. For 3 weeks, I had a roommate I didn't know about. They didn't catch him that night. He was gone by the time everything was searched and documented. He must have slipped out during the commotion or sometime before I called. The jacket was still on the hook. He left in a hurry this time. What I can't stop thinking about, and I mean this keeps me up at night, is how long it might have gone on if I hadn't put up that camera. He wasn't hurting me. He wasn't going through my stuff, at least not in any obvious way. He was just coexisting, in my space, in my home, eating food from my kitchen and sleeping behind a door I'd written off as broken. And the worst part, looking back, there were moments, just small moments, where I felt like something was slightly off, like the energy in the house was a little heavier than it should have been. I didn't trust that feeling. I told myself it was just adjusting to a new place. I trust that feeling now. I moved out the next morning, stayed with my friend until I found something else. The new place is an apartment on the 3rd floor. I've checked every door, every window, every space big enough for a person. Some people say the scariest thing is a stranger breaking into your home. I'd argue the scariest thing is finding out one never left. If these stories got under your skin, hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon so you never miss next stories. If you made it all the way to the end, leave a comment below. Tell me what you will do in these situations. And if these stories keep you up, share it with someone who loves horror stories. I will see you in the next stories.